Good morning, hello, and welcome to the first episode of CloudCannon's Static Feedback. This is our new webinar we're going to be running roughly monthly. Today I'm really excited to be talking to Liam Bigelow, Senior Software Engineer here at CloudCannon. Liam has had a good background in open source software. He is responsible for and the lead maintainer of our fantastic bookshop component development workflow, which also offers live editing to static site generators like Jekyll and Hugo, as well as a host of other page building tricks. Today Liam's going to be joining me to talk about Pagefind, his new search tool, which is quite wonderful really. It aims to perform well on large sites using as little of your users' bandwidth as possible and without hosting any infrastructure. Let's flick over now to Liam. Good morning, Liam.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Lovely to be here.
Can we start with a little bit about what Pagefind does first, and we'll jump back into a bit more about open source after that.
Yeah, sounds good. So Pagefind finds pages, in a word. It's the static search tool, similar to some indexing libraries like Luna.js or other sort of JavaScript front-end search libraries. And so it allows you to search a static site entirely in the browser. You don't have to spin up any infrastructure or host any servers. But uniquely, it does that in a way where it scales far beyond some of the other ones, was the original goal.
Fantastic. Now, I said earlier, this isn't your first open source project by any means. Can you give us a bit of background in what got you into open source development to start with?
It's a great question. Definitely working at CloudCannon. We do a lot of open source things here, a lot of things that sort of benefit the ecosystem that we work in. I'd say probably Jekyll first got me into open source, both submitting patches to Jekyll as I hit issues and building my own Jekyll plugins outside of work. And then also, yeah, just the ability to spend some of my time at work on open source tools has been fantastic.
I think there's something quite beautiful about open source where, I came into CloudCannon seeing it as a commercial entity with a CMS, but it's quite amazing seeing the resources going into creating open source tooling for everyone to use. And it does benefit CloudCannon, but at the same time, it's such an efficient way, or can be such an efficient way to develop, drawing on community expertise.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk more about Pagefind. So why search? Hasn't that already been solved? Didn't Google and Algolia fix that?
At a certain scale, yes. So we make a lot of websites here for sort of our enterprise customers and for ourselves. And search is definitely something that, despite all of the available solutions, was still a bit of a sticking point. Search to me always felt solved at both ends of the scale. You know, a really small site would search well in the front end, just in JavaScript, and an e-commerce store searches really well with an e-commerce backend. And there's this middle ground where it's sort of scaled out of that search. You didn't really want to spin up and host search because that somewhat goes against a lot of the ethos around static sites, around them being self-contained and portable. You can host them anywhere behind just a static web server. And then the fact that there's this middle ground that you couldn't scale into sort of meant that, depending on the site, you'd be hesitant to start off with a front-end search, even if it was fine at that scale. Because if you're delivering a website to a client, you want to make sure that if they come back and ask, what if I add 10,000 pages, you don't have to re-engineer quite as much.
That's right. So, and I guess every client's different too, right? Like you always want to be able to give them, to future-proof them for a while. And if you choose a front-end library or something that will work at a small scale, you're potentially making work for yourself down the line.
Yep.
Yeah. So how does Pagefind scale? How do you solve the scaling problem?
So technically, it solves the scale by sort of chunking itself. and I'll get into that when I run through a demo. But the general idea is that by doing more work upfront when indexing the site, you don't have to load absolutely everything to search.
Right. So that's a very static approach, isn't it? Doing the work up front. So you're not, your user and everyone else is not doing the work every single time later.
Exactly. Yeah. I've joked that it's an SSG in that it's a static search generator.
Yep, I love it. And just one more thing before we dig into this this demo. Pagefind we've called it SSG agnostic, so it doesn't need to have a certain SSG. It doesn't have to be tuned for what can be, I imagine, but it doesn't have to be tuned for every single SSG.
Correct. Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that, or is it just a part of that the new SSG static search?
It's a thing that we seem to do a lot internally here. We've got a few tools that we've made that I think we're starting to dub SSG chaining. So we've got Rosie for internationalization. We've got some pagination tools. We've got the search tool. We've got some other ones around helping you with links across websites. The general idea is that we're very much SSG polyglots here, and we use everything under the sun. And it makes sense from a work perspective to not build the same plugin 10 times into different sites. We can make use of the fact that, the tools that we use output to this really convenient intermediary format called HTML that the web uses. And so we sort of try to build our tooling and our plugins around that. And thus they work no matter what we do. As long as you wind up with a static site, then you can use these tools on it.
That's fantastic, because it gives, I imagine, a kind of peace of mind to users that they're not going to be upgraded out of a particular tool that they want to use. If it's agnostic enough, it relies on Markdown or HTML or something intermediary. Yeah,
it's a really evergreen tool, and you gain all of the expertise and all of the improvements and development that happens from all the SSG communities. So you really get all the benefits.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm really excited. Let's dig into it. So I understand you've chosen a site for us to get Pagefind running on. Would you mind sharing your screen, and then you can drive and just talk us through what you're going to do?
All right, let's do it. I'll share that. Alrighty.
Okay, so we've got let'sencrypt.org.
Straight to it.
Why not?
So I was looking around for a site that would be a good candidate to add search for in a quick demo, and came across the Let's Encrypt site. So this is a fully static Hugo site, actually made by Bet, the creator of Hugo, funnily enough. And it has a lot of the features that I wanted to show off. So we've got documentation on this site. We have a blog as part of it. And we also have it translated into about 30 different languages.
Oh, fantastic. So and this is something, languages, you've just added this, right? Like you're on
yes,
0.8.
like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
0.7 added languages.
That's right.
And so this is really a perfect site to show off a lot of the things that Pagefind just gives you out of the box. And I think the pace of this demo will show how easy a lot of things are to add. And of course, the site does not yet currently have a search. So beyond this being a nice educational screen share, I'll also be able to turn this into a pull request after the stream, and hopefully we'll be able to search Let's Encrypt.
Fantastic. So what's the benefit to you or to Pagefind of having documentation, blog? I mean, we talked about the benefit of adding languages, but what can Pagefind do with different sources of content like this?
So Pagefind, beyond just search, also has good filtering support, which is something people often want to do alongside search. Search for a specific type of content, search for something by a specific author, any sort of, refining those results down. And so having a site with docs and blogs at least lets me sort of add some filtering so that we can show off how that works.
So I suppose the other alternative to that would be having different search instances for docs and then another one for blog that only searches that. But if you can have a single site search that the user can filter down, that's a more powerful experience.
Yeah, you can either do it like that, or you can search absolutely everything, and then in JavaScript, once you get the results, sort of cherry pick from that based on a filter. But it's a lot more work to build. It's nicer to just get it for free.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, let's cut down as much work as we can.
Yeah. So I already have it cloned here. I thought I'd save us the time of cloning this repo, but I otherwise have made absolutely no changes from their GitHub. And so we'll just spin up their site here to see that we've got it all running locally through Hugo. And pop that open, and we have the exact same site.
Great.
So now we'll dig into Pagefind. So firstly, the first thing Pagefind needs, since it runs after an SSG and ingests a static site, is the static site. So we'll run just Hugo to build our site and get us our directory of HTML files. And then within that, we'll see all of our static files. Running Pagefind is really easy. Pagefind itself is a binary that's distributed through a GitHub release, but we have an npx wrapper. Run Pagefind, make sure to run the latest, and I pass it the source of the public directory, which is Hugo's output directory. We'll run that will find and download the binary, run through, index the site, and we should be done, in about 4.8 seconds. We can see that it's pulled out 20 languages, it's pulled out 60,000 words.
So you've created an index, you've indexed multiple languages, almost 1,000 pages in under 5 seconds.
Yes.
Thumbs up.
And then it's sort of done, and you're, what now?
Great. I should note, just for people watching on the stream, if you have questions along the way, send them through. We may not get to questions until after the demo, just because it may get quite involved, but I'll do my best to pick them up, and we'll attack any questions afterwards.
Good job. So we've run Pagefind, and it's said it's done. What we can do is, if we look in our public directory, you'll see that there's a new _Pagefind folder in here, and this is the Pagefind bundle. So this contains your search index, this contains any JavaScript, UI stuff you might need. And to see that in action, I'll actually just host that directory through a static web server, just to show that truly no search magic is going on here. This is just Python's built-in web server. It could be anything. So of course we haven't added a search input to the page, so we don't have, a search box we can type in. But Pagefind is quote unquote installed. So to first show that, we can use the Pagefind JavaScript API. This is what you'd use if you're building your own search input or integrating Pagefind into your own JavaScript components if you've already got those. So for that, you import the Pagefind JavaScript, bump up this font size for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. And this file is created by Pagefind in your static site when you run the command. So Pagefind's modified our static site, and this is one of the assets that it's created. So we import that, and we get an object. And then with this, we can say that we want to search for something. So we will await Pagefind.search growth is a good word. And we've got a set of results. One of the things with Pagefind is that it's very incremental in the data that it fetches. And so then to get something about these results, we would do await search.results 0, and we'll get its data. And then with that, we can see that we've got a URL, we've got content, we've got an excerpt that's highlighted that content for what we actually searched for. There's some metadata, there's some other content there. You can see how this is really the building blocks of a really great search tool.
Yeah. So then I imagine your UI will then pick up on these or can then pick up on all of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is what's going on under the hood, but of course not everyone wants to build their own UI from scratch, and that's where Pagefind provides a UI for you out of the box. So we'll go to the Pagefind app here, and I'll add the UI snippet. We'll add that to the site. And again, notably, we just searched the site without actually touching the code at all. We only ran a CLI command, which is quite remarkable.
That is.
But now we'll jump into the code for the first time. So we're just gonna, for this demo, add search to the homepage. I think before making this a pull request, I'll probably wind up splitting it out into a separate search page, but there's a bit of Hugo work in there that's beside the point for this.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And so for now, I'll just drop the UI snippet in here. So we've got some CSS and JavaScript that's again provided automatically by Pagefind in the output folder, and then a little script to initialize it. And in reality, you'd tidy this up and move these assets into your head and all of that. But for now, we'll just drop it all here so that we can see it spin up on the page.
Great.
So with that, we now need to rebuild our site because we changed our Hugo source, not our Hugo output. And then we'll rerun Pagefind on that and see where we're at.
Incidentally, another benefit of choosing a Hugo site to demo live on screen, just that quick rebuild.
Yes, Hugo is great for the demos. So I'll run Pagefind again, and we have a handy little serve flag here, where Pagefind itself will spin up a web server to save you from that Python step. I did the Python step to show you that this isn't hosting like a Pagefind search server. This is just a utility to save you a command.
Full disclosure, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And that'll search through, spin it up. In general, Pagefind should be about as fast as Hugo, or in this case, faster. So it tries to not be a burden on your workflow in that way. So when we pull that up, we now have a search input on our page. And we can do what we did before and search for things and get pages back. It's automatically got images, shows us the search word that we highlighted. And we've already leapfrogged by many hours setting up search through pretty much any other means.
Oh, that's incredible. So, and can you talk me through how that is changing as you type? How are the results growing? So if you start with grow or start with gr, you're giving something, and it's just filtering down.
So under the hood, Pagefind splits out your website into a bunch of alphabetical indexes. So, for example, there might be an index that contains all words starting with G through H. And as your site grows, those indexes just become smaller and smaller slices. So as soon as you type G here, then it starts indexing all words that start with G. And then it can sort of search ahead and say, okay, well, we've got some words that are extensions of this on these pages. And as you type, we can keep searching it. All the searching's done in WebAssembly. Everything to do with Pagefind's pretty much all written in Rust, which compiles really nicely to WebAssembly. And that allows us to search really, really quick, so we can just afford to do it on type whenever the input changes.
Fantastic.
So everything's pretty quick.
That's incredible. And now, just a question about the UI. You supply, or Pagefind supplies CSS and JavaScript pre-built.
Yes.
How configurable is this for people who want something like dark mode? I saw an issue come up last week or the week before about dark mode.
Yeah, there was one. So pretty easy. There's a few different ways. I'd say the easiest one is that Pagefind includes a set of CSS custom properties here. So you can override these on your site. If you've got a light and dark mode class, then you sort of inside your dark mode class, just redefine some of these, change your Pagefind text and backgrounds and just flip those around. Or you can even come in here and actually scale down the UI if you want a really small search.
Lovely.
That sort of thing. Additionally, it's all of these classes that are put here stable. We try not to change those, and they will be documented if they do change. So you can just come in here and write your own style sheet if you don't want to include the Pagefind CSS at all. So the goal is that you can go pretty far with the Pagefind UI before having to build your own. And ideally, you never have to build your own.
Wonderful. Now, I have one other question. So you're running this locally, and you have, let's say, blazingly fast results, to coin a phrase that we've heard a million times before. They're incredibly fast. Is it any slower running it on production?
Yes, a little bit, but not dramatically. If anyone's interested in the performance of it, you can go to pagefind.app, the documentation, which unsurprisingly has Pagefind within. So here we can start searching for something, and you'll see the UI is really snappy, and you get loading placeholders as it's searching for things. Once you've loaded those indexes, it's really, really quick. And so we can search for things, and past a certain point, it's sort of loaded everything into memory, and you can search really fast. But it's all static. They're all very small static files. Pagefind uses as little bandwidth as it can get away with. We'll show that in a sec.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's as snappy as it can be, really, without upfront loading 10 megabytes over the network, which I'd argue makes other searches sometimes less snappy, the amortized cost.
Absolutely, yeah. And you always want to be aware of users on low bandwidth or on mobile or any other constraint that we don't necessarily have in our offices with a fast connection. Again, I guess this is about building for as many people as possible, right?
Yeah, exactly. So another thing that we've got just immediately out of the box that we haven't configured already is multilingual search. So here, where I'm searching the Let's Encrypt website for Grow, you'll see all of these results are in English. If I swap over to French, am I still running that? Oh no, that worked. Then you'll see one, Pagefind itself is now in French. And two, if I search for more, we get all of our results in French. And this is specifically all of the pages on the Let's Encrypt website that were tagged with the language French. So Pagefind automatically splits itself out into every available language and indexes them separately, and sort of plugs that all together when it loads in the browser based on the page that you've loaded it on. And this also includes support for non-Latin languages here. So we can search across here in simplified Chinese and see that all of our words are pulled out. And again, the UI is translated into quite a few languages already. And it's very easy to translate if anyone watching speaks a language and uses Pagefind and it isn't currently in their language.
Fantastic. So we have, there are, is it 7 or 8 languages now that Pagefind currently supports?
Yeah, maybe up to about 10.
10, fantastic.
Yeah, and growing.
Yes.
Pagefind, I guess the search itself supports almost, about 30 languages in terms of stemming support. So that covers things like trimming a word down to the root word and thus getting different forms of the same word. Search for configuration, you'll get configuring in English. And it includes support for a lot of languages for that sort of improved search. And then separately, we have the UI support for just these translated things like number of results in the correct language.
So you're right. I think this would be an easy task a great task for someone, some kind of polyglot, or someone who speaks more than a single language, to just jump in. I think I had a quick look at the form, and it's something like maybe 20 terms that need to be translated for each language.
Even less. Might be about 10.
10.
Yeah,
I suppose.
It's mostly what's the word search, what's the word filter, how do you say how many results there were.
Yes. Yeah.
It's pretty easy.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, the bulk of the demo is done. We've got search on a website. We added a handful of lines there. But now that we're here, we can sort of improve on this search a little bit and start to customize things. So, for example, Pagefind by default is indexing just this whole site. There's a lot of HTML files and it's indexing all of them. It's fairly smart. It knows that, this is a navigation element. That's not a useful thing to search, and it's not going to search the footer. But for example, this block here is part of the page content and is a CTA on every page. So it's not that useful to search for. But right now, if we search for it, you'll see that we get support a more secure and privacy respecting web on every page, which is not the best search result. There's a few ways that Pagefind can tackle this, and this is where we start looking at Pagefind's data attributes. So for this, we will load up our single templates. So the easiest way to tackle this is just to tell Pagefind explicitly what we do want to be indexed. So here's our post layout for our blog, and around our actual main blog content, we can just come in here and say data Pagefind body. And actually, we want the title to be indexed, so we'll move that up to there. And this will essentially tell Pagefind to start indexing from here down for all of our content. And then I'll also just add that to our page content on our normal layout. And thankfully, this excludes, I don't think it's on this page, but that excludes things like that CTA, which are in a parent layout below our main content. And importantly, if this tag exists anywhere on your site, Pagefind will ignore any pages that don't feature it. So if we add this just to our post layout, then it would stop indexing our home page, it would stop indexing our contact page. And so you can use this as a really quick way to opt into search rather than specifically go and punch certain pages out. While we're here, I can also show the punch out version. So we've got this metadata here with the date and some author information, and we might not want this to be searched. So here we can do the inverse, which is data Pagefind ignore, and this will just ignore this whole element and not add it into our search index. It won't show up in the little excerpt, etc. And with those changes now, we will rerun. I'll just chain Hugo and Pagefind together and rebuild the site, re-index. It's a flow you get used to. And there we are. So we pop this open and we search for, what was it? Privacy respecting. No results, because it was only ever in that CTA. So now we've filtered down the content that we explicitly want to be searched for. The other couple features that I'll show are filtering and metadata, which Pagefind supports out of the box. So if I come in here on our post layout, there's a few little bits of information that would be great to show alongside our search results. So we've got the date and we've got the author. So I'm just going to wrap these in a span so that we can target each of them individually. And our author comes out here. And then we use yet another data tag. Data Pagefind meta is author. And this will automatically capture anything within this element and tag it against whatever page in the output site this is with that metadata. And same here on the date. And then additionally, we want to be able to filter, as we discussed before, to what's a blog, what's a documentation page. And we can do the same thing with a similar tag. Since this is our post layout here, I can just do a data Pagefind filter, and I'll say resource, and the type is blog. There's sort of a little syntax that the docs go into around what can be in these tags. So If you've got a colon, it just grabs this value and tags it as the resource. If you don't have that, it grabs whatever's within the element. But here we're saying that this is a blog resource. And then the site doesn't actually have a specific layout for its documentation. So for now, we're just going to say that anything that isn't a blog is probably docs. So we'll come in here and tag just every other single page, not our archives or anything, but every other single page as a documentation page. And with those, we can once again rebuild our site, rerun Pagefind, post it. This is the last one.
I'm enjoying the fact that it's so tunable to the specific use case of the site and the way that that site is built. And then Pagefind can respond to what could be quite idiosyncratic decisions about names of sections or the way you want to represent that section in a search result compared to how you want a user to see it.
Yeah, and by tagging it on the site itself, you've got your logic paired with your templates, you know, it's all sort of in one place. And it makes it really easy to do things like internationalize your filter values, because it'll automatically on a French page tag it as the value of that in French when you're capturing an element. So it makes it really easy to just actually reflect your real content without having to build your own search index separately.
That's right. But there's also sometimes the case where you just don't want to have that same. I'm speaking as a content writer or someone who thinks about what the user is going to be reading all the time. You don't always want the tag that you chose in your dev flow to come up or to pop up, or even the same one in the nav. You don't always want that to pop up in your search results.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So now we're back. We've got our search again. And if I search growth, then you'll see we've got an author tagged here for all of those pages. And then we've also got the type of resource. So I can now filter it to just blogs, or I can filter it to just documentation pages. And again, we had to do very, very little work to get this sort of metadata filtering, searching, multilingual search. And really, we're done.
That was I should have had a stopwatch running for this whole thing. That was incredible. So just one question on metadata. Are there any limits to the metadata that you can search with this? Or is it could you tune any kind of value?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
We try to not have any limits. The metadata that you can tag doesn't have any limitations on it, and like the size of the page that you can search also does not have any limitations on it beyond a point where it scales beyond what Pagefind can do. But that scale is still somewhat yet unknown to me. We have someone opened an issue recently for Pagefind against the entire Unity manual. That's about a 300 megabyte static site. And so I have a little bit of work to do to improve performance there, but it works. It just is a little bit sluggish in the browser.
That's a great test case though. And you really want something as big as possible.
Yeah, and in my original talk launching Pagefind at HugoConf, I showed it on MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, which is a very large site. And again, that one searches perfectly fine, and with very, very little bandwidth. So actually, that's worth showing now. So I'll reload our page, and I'll just filter our network tab down to Pagefind. And then let's search for certificate. So first you'll see when I focus the search input, we load all of our dependencies that we need. And that's currently about 80 kilobytes. And I'm running this locally, so that isn't gzipped yet. And then if I search something, we'll load an index and a bunch of fragments. Those fragments there are results. The index there is the chunk of the index that contains the word certificate that we need to be able to search. And so there we came out to 300 kilobytes total, including all of our JavaScript, all of our WebAssembly, and on an actual production site, that comes out to usually 120, 130 kilobytes once a server compression kicks in. And And that's fairly flat across most scales. Searching MDN again, I don't remember what it was. It was like 13,000 pages, or
Yeah.
it was something really big, and that was under 200 kilobytes to return a search term, and just as quick.
That's pretty
horizontally scaled.
I mean, when you compare it to an example of serving a 10 megabyte index every time someone loads the page,
exactly,
before they search. What about a repeated search? If I repeat the same term.
If you repeat the same term, then we don't need to load any extra information unless it pulls in new results, and we just load those little bits of metadata. Those files are usually in the actual bytes amount. That are very small.
And that's the kind of purity that you imagine, right? If you're just in an ideal world, if you're searching for a string of characters, a few bytes. Yeah.
Exactly. And that holds true for full text search. So we can actually come in here and put something in quotes, and theoretically that would return results, but I must not be indexing that page. But I mean, let's search for, let's encrypt. There we go. Let's encrypt in quotes, and we'll get explicitly, that exact phrase. It's like the Google put quotes around it, get it exactly.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're doing that, but also still in a super low bandwidth profile, a lot of front-end search tools with a 10 megabyte index still don't have all of the information to do actual word position searches. That's a more simple, this page does contain this word, but not how many or where are they. Yeah. And then the last thing, I won't go all the way to submitting a pull request here just because there's Hugo things to do, but one last thing worth showing is that, of course, then to deploy a website, you need to run Pagefind. And that's really easy on, I'd say, any CI platform, because it is just a chain step up to your build. So the Let's Encrypt website here is on Netlify, and we can see that there's their build command, hugo-d public. So if we were to deploy this site, just chain that into npx pagefind at latest, and with the source of public. And that is the production installation done. So
for Let's
we
Encrypt,
ran
that's
pretty
fantastic.
good search on the site, filtering multilingual and everything.
Yeah.
And looking at our commit here, we've changed almost nothing. And even some of this was flop. So it's pretty lean.
That's great. So there's the potential there for a site that has no search currently and has quite a lot of documentation. It's a pretty easy win. Just on CloudCannon, we can do the same thing, right? Like we include it in our build step and build instructions. For
yes,
people using
we've got.
CloudCannon.
Yeah, we've got build hooks, so you can hook into various points of your build. So you can run pre-build, post-build, etc. So on CloudCannon, you just do a post-build with the pagefind command in it as a file in your repo, and that's it.
Yep, and at a cost of a couple of seconds, depending on the size of your site. Yeah.
Very, very little. At a cost of less than your site takes to build.
That's right, regardless of the SSG you're using. And I think that's one of the other great appeals to me, and I've said this before, but it is completely separate. It is post-build. It's after the SSG has done its work, then Pagefind just swoops in and indexes. It's really an ideal situation.
Yeah.
One question though, I'm realizing if we're eventually submitting a pull request to Let's Encrypt, they're likely to have some concerns about security or encryption content of search results or of user behavior. Is there something that Pagefind does behind the scenes, or something it can do to increase security, or is that a concern?
It's not really a concern. By nature of Pagefind outputs everything static, and it's just hosted. They're just static files of your site. There's no search backend that's taking a query and executing, queries against your content to pull results. So really you get all of the security of your entire stack. Additionally, it does make your site a little harder to crawl compared to some other search libraries, if that's your concern. So, for example, a very easy way to add site is output your entire site also in a JSON file that you can search. But depending on the site, you may not want to output everything in a large JSON file that someone can download.
That's right.
But Pagefind really just as a side benefit, but by chunking those indexes and compressing everything as much as it can, there's very little that's readable in that folder. And since the results are loaded individually, you'd have to load every page as a request if you wanted to crawl the whole site, which is much the same as
and so in terms of user history, like user search history, it's as secure as your browser is. So it's your browser that's remembering what you're doing. So if you've locked that down to your liking.
Pagefind itself doesn't track anything. There's no server connections. It's entirely in browser. Any analytics is left as an exercise for the reader.
Wonderful. We had one question come through YouTube chats from Ken. He's asking, what are you finding most challenging currently about working on Pagefind?
Ooh, that's a fun one. I'd say the most challenging thing is, so first of all, I love that it's got such great pickup and we're getting so many feature requests and I want to build them all. The challenge is A, the time to build them, and B, I'd say implementing a lot of the richer features that people expect from search without compromising on that bandwidth aspect.
Yes.
So an example of something that will be built at some point is an improvement around spell checking. User does a typo in their search and we sort of are able to find exactly what they're looking for. And that's a challenging feature to build in this extremely horizontally scaled, chunked world where, we don't have a list on hand of we don't have a dictionary and we haven't loaded the whole site in. So if you've got a typo, we might not. We don't necessarily actually have word you intended loaded. And got some ideas and some ways to fit that in. So it's still a fun challenge. But it's the challenge of not compromising on bandwidth, which is really the sort of the peak goal of Pagefind is scale bandwidth.
It seems to me that you've chosen this constraint. I mean, it's a laudable constraint of low bandwidth, low overhead, and that kind of gives you a creative freedom to achieve the constraint, right? Like people always seem more creative when they're locked into a certain set of rules, and then you just have to find out clever ways to do things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think constraints are great in that sense. And when it's a meaningful constraint that is a specific benefit and, it's motivating to try to stay within that constraint.
Yeah. So what kind of sites, you mentioned the community response to Pagefind has been really encouraging. What kind of sites is it currently being used on?
Quite a few. There's a lot of blogs, a lot of personal blogs, documentation sites. We're rolling it out on the CloudCannon, documentation and blog sites. Really, the whole gamut. Anything by nature, it can run on any HTML files. We're seeing it across every SSG. The Hugos and the Jekylls and the Eleventys build fully static, and they're really easy. I've seen people using it on Astro. And even the JavaScript heavy SSR sites, your Nexts and your SvelteKit and everything, feature, the static SSR render of all of their content, and people are indexing that with Pagefind. And I've seen some people that are using it with non-static sites, actually. I've seen people use it with sort of dynamic sites that can, like PHP-backed sites, that can also build a static version, and they can build a static version of the site, index that, and then host those search files. So it's spreading even beyond our ecosystem.
That's a great way to get around the constraint, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're still delivering it dynamically, but you're just indexing off static.
Exactly.
Yeah. What a good way to go. Again, people can have a look at Pagefind on GitHub, and they can open issues. They can make comments, or even suggest fixes themselves or changes themselves. How do you feel about that process? And I know we talked about you enjoying open source, but some people put a tool out into the world and then they kind of hope it's perfect and stop. But I get the feeling you actively not quite jump up and down and dance, but there's a certain excitement when someone opens an issue or suggests something.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. Partially, you've got the satisfaction of people using a thing that you've built and finding its edges and where to push it, what its boundaries are. And I mean, I just really enjoy building workflows for people. So an issue means that I'm hearing about a new workflow and a new way to sort of continue to push this to be as zero config and as easy to understand as possible. And maybe in time that'll mean some feature requests get not implemented under the goal of, I don't want it to just grow and become, a behemoth. There's definitely value in a documentation site that you can skim read in one go and get the whole tool as a mental model in your head, and stay within that bounds of something really digestible. But yeah, I love seeing all the issues. It's great.
Which brings me to my next question. What's next for you? What's on the roadmap for Pagefind? Or what are the things that you're scoping out currently?
Yeah. So the biggest things have just been released. So that's the multilingual one that we just saw. Mm-hmm. And like 3 days ago, multi-site was released. So with that one, you can load your blog and documentation indexes if they are not part of the same static site as in Let's Encrypt. If you've got blog.mycompany.com and docs.mycompany.com, you can do a cross-origin request and load those indexes in together and sort of smush them together in the browser. You can weight them against each other. You can add filters to each index so that you get filters that we saw in the Pagefind UI. And those were, I thought that'd take longer. But there are a lot of things still on the list to start digging into. So around the spell checking and those sort of search recommendations, providing just better search results and helping if they've searched for something slightly off the mark. And I'd say performance on the really large sites is one. Just making sure that that upper end of where Pagefind scales pushes and pushes and pushes, and really is at the point that if your site is viable as a static site, then your site is viable to be searched with Pagefind. So those are the main two big things. And if anyone else has any other things they want, open an issue. Generally, as I have an idea, I open an issue about it. So the issues page also serves as a pretty good roadmap for Pagefind.
That sounds fantastic. And I notice you often actually reply individually to people to say, look, this is what I think you can achieve. This is maybe at the bounds of what Pagefind is for. But there's always, I think, really useful feedback to people, even when they open an issue that might not fit within the scope of Pagefind.
It's always a fun bit of problem solving.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Liam. If people have any questions, where can they find you, or where can they find Pagefind?
So Pagefind, the easiest way to get to it would be pagefind.app is the documentation site. From there, you can jump over to the GitHub, CloudCannon /Pagefind on GitHub. Easiest way to reach me would just be do any activity at all on the Pagefind repo, which I watch like a hawk, and I'll I'll be on it pretty quick.
Show some interest, and Liam's right there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Liam. This has been a really fun and exciting debut episode of Static Feedback. I'm really delighted to be able to show what other people in the CloudCannon team are working on. So a round of internet applause for Liam Bigelow, Senior Software Engineer at CloudCannon. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here. Cheers.
And there we have it, folks. That was the debut episode of Static Feedback from CloudCannon. Next month, I hope you'll join us for another interview / workshop / discovery about another fun static tool or developer. We'll get the details out to you as soon as possible. If you would like to follow what we're doing, you can follow CloudCannon at CloudCannon on Twitter. You can follow me at at AvidLarge on Twitter. Or follow along with the CloudCannon blog and our general outgoing and exciting information about static as we grow. Thank you so much. I hope you'll join us again in a month or so. But for now, all the best. Happy coding, and do check out Pagefind. Pagefind.app is where to go for the full docs, and you can head over to the GitHub link from there. Thanks a lot.